It's time for the No Nonsense Roundtable. Insights to capture your imagination from people you know and people you'd like to know about. Each week, a different guest from a different walk of life. Now, here is the host of the No Nonsense Roundtable, Dom Geneva.
Well, welcome everybody to the No Nonsense Roundtable. I'm here with Dr. Ogilvie of the Rochester Institute of Technology School of Business, the Saunders School of Business, somebody that I've gotten to know over the past few months. We, frankly, were at a luncheon one day, and we started talking to one another. And, well, what do you do? Well, I'm a professor at RIT. Well, geez, that's pretty good. Where? The Saunders School of Business. Well, Phil Saunders has been on the show a couple of times, and Dr. Munson, and, what do you do? Oh, business. And, oh, you're an entrepreneur. Yes, I'm an entrepreneur. And we start talking about, well, just life and creativity. And not only were we getting along, but we were starting to complete each other's sentences, which is really kind of cool. You kind of connected with somebody because she has a wonderful depth of knowledge in academics as a doctor, obviously, and I'm somebody who couldn't even get into the Rochester Institute of Technology because they rejected my application, but I was going to be an engineer, and I wasn't qualified for that. And the rest is history. We're here now to talk about her philosophy, her teaching style, her students, the path that she's taken in life, and welcome to my studio. It's great to see you.
It's great to be here now.
So let's talk about your path in life. I always see people on the show, this is a 200 and something show, that have had straight paths in life, and some people that kind of pivoted and got where they are. So what was your path? Just the 90-second eyewash on that.
So I grew up in Harlem, New York.
Ah, okay.
A two-parent household. Went to school. I was a very voracious reader. I got that from both my father and my mother. Both of them were voracious readers, and so are my siblings. Had a very different, I was very shy.
Really?
Painfully so. And, I was just always with a book. And, thought about different careers. Went to college. Came out not really knowing exactly what to do. Got a job in photography. I'd been doing photography at college. Ended up working for a couple of small organizations, one as a COO to help them turn around, and then a CEO of another one that needed turning around. And got into big corporate, which was the Southland Corporation.
Oh, okay.
Ran multi-million-dollar profit centers, and then got recruited down to corporate headquarters to do strategic planning, because it was a fly-by-the-seat-of-your-pants company. And so I introduced strategic planning. First I did information systems planning, then strategic planning, and then went on a trip to Africa, Kenya, and that changed what I wanted to do.
Really?
And that's what got me into doing more, making a difference.
Now, what college did you go to?
I went to Oberlin. Okay. And then I went to SMU. Okay. And then I went to University of Texas at Austin.
Is that where you got your PhD?
Yes, at UT Austin.
So that's quite a lot of work. Obviously, but how did this trip to Kenya change your direction?
It was my first time. Well, not my first time in a black country, because I had been to Jamaica. I'm half Jamaican. But it did something to me in terms of making a difference in a different way and making a difference in a larger way. I made some difference when I was in corporate. Some of the things I introduced are still going on today. But Kenya just made me decide to become an academic.
So what in Kenya did you see that you hadn't seen before?
Well, people running things, going on safari. Oh, it was just an experience, the beauty of the country. It just did something. But specifically, in which direction did it make you? It sounded like it made you have a cause or an adventure. Maybe some sort of epiphany. I had been when I was in.
That's what I want to hear.
When I was in my MBA program, my professor said you should get a PhD, which I basically ignored because I was running, this area, and then they. Well, my company had a year-long training program for marketing for senior execs, and they said to me, you should get a PhD. And I hadn't thought about it. But then my company did a LBO, leveraged buyout,
Okay.
where the executives take big loans to buy the company.
Uh-huh.
And I was not involved in it, although I was one of the very few, if any, others were, who knew what was going on. Not because I was told by the executives, but another way I found out. And I realized, and then they came to me and said, we need to get to here. It was a big jump because the price at which the LBO was executed was much higher than it should have been. If we had stock, which we did, we made money, but it was a big nut to crack. And when I tried to suggest different things we should do, they just wanted to do what they'd always done, but do it better.
So you got dissatisfied with the big company.
Yeah, well, I knew that they weren't going to succeed with just do what we've always done.
Well, that's one of the things that you and I have in common. We've worked for big companies, and we were talking about that. Everybody should know that DT was very gracious the other day and let me come in and speak with your class.
Yes. And
you seem to have a feeling about academics and the same thing I do. I have an MBA in marketing, but there's things that you learn in the classroom and the things that you learn outside the classroom, and the things that you can only learn in the classroom, and the things you can only learn outside the classroom.
Right.
And you seem to have a pretty good way of teaching your students that way. It seems to be your philosophy, right?
Well, having experience and having run something, which most of my peers haven't done.
Right.
When I was in corporate, and running these, smaller organizations, so it gave me a different type of experience and a knowledge of what students needed to know and what students needed to do, and trying to impart that to them in a way that made sense. And so I loved having you at my class so you could talk about your experiences and impart some wisdom to the students.
Well, I have to tell you, I was actually a little nervous. These are 35 students, and these, they're all smarter than I am. There's no question about it. They're all smarter than I am. I have more money than they do, but they're smarter than I am. And you're wondering whether you're connecting with them or not, and it was very rewarding for me to be there. The thing that you said is absolutely true, though. These people, a lot of people in academics are teaching something and they've never been involved in it, and it's the perception of what reality is, but it's not really what reality is. So there's no substitution for experience. You need academics, but you also need the practical application of whatever you're talking about. And I put it this way, I'm talking too much myself right now, but you need an engine and a transmission. You need the academics to teach you, but you also need a way of taking what you learn in the classroom and applying it in a practical manner, right?
Yeah, definitely. And RIT is known for having students who can practice the theory. They can take what they're learning, as opposed to some other schools where they're more theoretical.
Right.
And then they have to, get out there and learn about the realities.
Right. And that's a quality that I'm sure the students all appreciate in what you do. And one of the things that you've written a number of different books, right?
I've written one book.
Oh, one book. Okay, it's one book. And the book is on creativity. And we're going to talk about that when we come back from the break, because anybody who knows Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and if you haven't seen or you haven't read Maslow's hierarchy of needs, you really need to do it. Just Google it. And on top of the list now, it used to be self-actualization, and now you said creativity.
Right?
Leaving something behind that wasn't there before. Yeah. So right after the break, we're going to talk a little bit more about that concept, all told, and we'll see you then. Well, welcome back. You're listening to the No Nonsense Roundtable. We're talking today to Dr. Ogilvie, who is a professor at the Rochester Institute of Technology, the Saunders School of Business, and we were talking about the practical application of what she does and what she teaches her students. And one thing I have to say is that you listeners pretty much are all over the age of 35. And older. We are talking to people that are not in college. They have either students that might be going to college, children, or grandchildren. And what my objective is today is to interview DT about the RIT School of Business, but more importantly about her philosophy of teaching her students and what she thinks is important. And on top of the list we were talking before is creativity, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes. I think creativity is very important. A lot of people, they'll feel they're not creative, and they live their lives as if they are not creative, which can create some problems for them because they don't have the opportunity to get to that top of Maslow's hierarchy to self-actualize. You have to be willing to fail,
right,
without viewing yourself as a failure.
Yep.
You have to deal with ambiguity, not just uncertainty. Those are two different things. And unfortunately, in our school system, we tend to leach the creativity out of kids so that by the time they're 11 or 12, they lose a lot of their creativity. And unless they're in doing something like music or art or something, but they don't necessarily think beyond that.
Right.
They use their creativity.
Right. And I think, well, we were talking before the show about the pressure that some parents put on their children to succeed and without having a tolerance for failure.
Right. Some parents are like, you have to get all A's, and if you get less than an A, that's terrible, and you get punished.
Yeah.
Parents love their kids. They want them to be successful, but oftentimes what they do, I find, is that they impose themselves on their kids, and they don't allow their kids to flourish and be themselves. Parents should not be trying to live their lives through their children.
Right.
Because they really do their kids a disservice. And parents, I was with some educators, and a woman who was an educator was talking about she couldn't go somewhere because she has to read a book to help her kid to write their essay. And actually she was going to write it sounded like. And I was appalled. Parents should not be doing their students' work for them, their kids' work for them. The kids have to learn how to do work on their own. They have to learn how to succeed on their own. And if they have to spend extra time, then spend extra time. But they shouldn't be put in this position because all you're doing is emasculating. And I'm not saying that in terms of gender, but they're robbing their children. They're hurting them, and they don't realize it. That's why, the anxiety levels today among kids is huge.
Right.
It's off the charts. And I think the parents unknowingly are contributing to that.
Well, there's a couple of stories that I can contribute here myself because my daughter, one of my daughters, went to a college. She was exceedingly unhappy, unhappy. And Nita and I said to her, okay, you have to dig yourself out of this. You find the path. You dig your way out of this. We'll help you. We're not going to pick you up and say, listen, you got to come home and whatever. You dig yourself. So she went, I won't tell you who it is, which one of my children, but went to a different college, found out what she needed to do, made the application, got a scholarship, transferred herself, and ended up very well because she dug herself out herself, and she had a life skill that she wouldn't have before.
And she also learned something in the process about herself, and gained a confidence in herself that she would otherwise not have gotten if you had done it for her. Right,
and that's the thing. They have to learn how to fail. The funny thing is that I look back in my life. And, I was one of these kids that, I was bullied all the time, and I couldn't do anything in the gym class, and they're making fun of me, whatever. I learned to live with humiliation. It's like, okay, fine, whatever. It's okay. You kind of toughened up a little bit, with that. And it was, and believe it or not, I think I look back at it like, it was a life skill. It wasn't that bad of a deal.
Yeah. But if you have somebody, who belittles you in your immediate family and who kind of robs you of that ability to learn how to deal with things, then the rest of your life you can't deal with it because it's too late.
Now, some people say that about 20 or 30 years ago, we made a mistake saying that our children didn't have good enough self-esteem. So we started rewarding them for things that they didn't do.
Right.
Is that, do you subscribe to that?
Oh, no. Here's little Johnny and little Mary. They're playing baseball. They can't hit the ball. They can't run. And they get a trophy. Instead of saying, look, Johnny, if you want to play baseball, you got to learn how to hit the ball. So let's practice. Let me help you. Let me help you to learn how to hit the ball. Or let me help you to learn how to run or whatever. But if you just get a trophy for doing nothing, that just screws up your head.
Well, I like to tell this story. I think I might have told it yesterday at my lecture. Is that I had somebody that applied to be the sales manager at my dealership, and he never sold a car before. He was never in the car business before. And I'm saying, well, what qualifications do you have to manage the sales floor of 10 people? Well, I went to school and I got a degree and I have it. It's like, okay, nobody ever told this young fella no.
Right.
That's not the way that the world works.
No, it's not. You said something about your daughter, which I think is important. I don't know if anybody has read Malcolm Gladwell, who's a terrific author. He wrote a book called David and Goliath. And in the book, he talks about a young woman who did exceedingly well in her high school, and so well that she had offers from a bunch of different schools, including some Ivies. And, of course, everybody told her to go to the Ivy. The local college, or in the state, which was one of the top colleges in the country, also made her an offer, but she went to the Ivy. She was so unhappy. She lost her self-esteem. She lost her self-confidence.
Oh, yeah.
She didn't do as well because that was not the right place for her.
That's
Had
exactly
she gone
right.
to the other school, she would have been the big fish in the pond as opposed to the minnow in the big school.
No, I think there's a lot of truth to that. So I guess it's kind of fun. When I was selling cars, I said, cars are like shoes. They have to be affordable, a style you like, comfortable, and you can't return them. So when you're picking a college, I think that's probably a pretty good lesson for us to say to people here listening on the show, is that your child should be fit into the college that's right for them too, right?
Right, and if they're unhappy, they should be able to change that situation.
Right.
Go to another. I have a couple of PhD students who were in that same boat. They were not happy.
Yeah.
They were not doing well. And then I put them, brought them to Rutgers when I was at Rutgers. And now they're thriving.
Right, and fitting the child to the school, I think, has got to be very important, because I had a college counselor on the show one day, and I said, all these schools with all these amenities and stuff and whatever. And she says, well, they're used to that at school, they're at home and whatever. And I'm like, I used to make grilled cheese sandwiches with my iron. I mean, times have changed since then, but the cost of college is so big and is so large, and it becomes such a burden for people. And the other thing that I talk about, I talked to Phil Saunders about this, was on the show, having a marketable skill.
Yes. Students need to have a marketable skill. They need to know how to sell themselves, how to do the interview, how to negotiate their salary. But they need something that, they can do. Right.
And you need to understand that you may not get to the destination that you're looking for, but you should put yourself in a direction. And we can talk a little bit more about that after the break now. But I think that's another important thing, because everybody, you say, well, you have to go to college. If you go to college and you get a degree in Russian history, well, then as far as getting employment,
well, we should talk about entrepreneurship after the break.
Yes, well, we'll talk about that. And it's about time for a break. Well, welcome back to the No Nonsense Roundtable. We're talking to Dr. D.T. Ogilvie, and you spell your first name with a small d and a small t.
I spell both my first and last name in lowercase letters.
And why is that? I mean, that sounds very creative. We're about to talk about creativity, but why do you do that?
Well, when I got a copy of my birth certificate to get my license, anyway, on my birth certificate, my name is in lowercase letters.
Okay, and you just decided to keep that.
So I kept it. So I figured that's my legal name.
Yeah, it's nice though. It sets you apart from everybody else, and then it shows your creativity, which we're about to talk about. But we were talking about going to college and having a marketable skill, and I guess you could turn anything into a marketable skill. But everybody doesn't want to go to business school. And everybody doesn't want to work for a big company, but most people, unless they're wealthy, are going to have to work. Right.
And so my philosophy is, if you want to be an artist, you don't have to be a starving artist, but you have to think creatively about what your career can be.
Right.
And for some people, it's being an entrepreneur, selling their skills to somebody else who needs it or wants it. Mm-hmm. And I think so therefore I would advise all students, I would advise to take some entrepreneurship courses.
Right.
Take some business courses.
Well, that makes sense because you can take something that you love and you can turn it into something that makes money for you. You know, I had Jeff Tyzik on the show a few weeks ago, and we were talking about his philosophy of teaching students, and he was saying that there are two philosophies. One is Warren Buffett, and he says, do what you love. And Mark Cuban says, do what you're good at. And he says, I'm more in the do what you love sort of thing.
Well, hopefully the two are the same.
Yeah, but here's the thing. You know, he was talking about his daughter wanted to sing opera at the Met, and Carmen of all things. He says, well, she didn't get there, but she did something different. She's managing those people now, and we were talking about the concept of point yourself into a direction and not necessarily a destination. Right. And it's sort of like I kind of articulated this, you know, like kind of be where you love. When you say that, if you like the theater, be in the theater.
Yes,
if you want to, you know, if you're a musician, be where musicians are.
But you also said something to my students which I thought was very powerful, and it was about your daughter, who's a photographer. And so she was doing a different type of photography, even though she had a goal. Right, to be in a certain
she was doing
paper.
For anybody that doesn't know, because I mentioned it before on another show, she was doing digital teching, which is assisting a photographer. So she would be on these photo shoots, these very, very big photo shoots. And one of them was BMW and whatever. And she's behind the laptop. Right. And she's telling the photographer basically what to do and then retouching the photographs when they come back. So she's not doing what she wants to do, but it's a path to what she wants to do. And you've seen
she's turned her skill into a way to get remuneration in an area that she cares about. Right. And then eventually she was able to get her photo shoot in the Times, which I'm sure has opened some other doors for her.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Once you have photographs in the Times, you can say, I have photographs in the Times.
Exactly.
So, and that has to do with your reputation, which you know, my dad told me that years ago. She says, you have one reputation, when it's gone, it's gone.
That's
true. He was talking about ethics when he was talking about that. But you have a reputation for doing a certain job, let's say.
Yep. And so, as a student, if you think about it, yes, I want to be in Russian history. Okay, what can you do with that? You know, maybe you write a book, right? Or maybe you write articles. Maybe you advise people who are interested in Russia. You give them, you know, you become a consultant, right? But if you just think of, you know, I don't know what you would think of in Russian, you know, become a teacher. Well, you know, yeah, but that's not the only path, right? So you have to think creatively about how you can use something that you love to be in that venue.
Well, you know, I'll talk about my other daughter. So my other daughter graduated with a degree in English. And she says to me one day, oh, Dad, you know, what am I going to do? I have a degree in English. I'm never going to be as successful as you. Well, okay. So she goes and she's interns at the Attorney General's office here in Rochester. She gets a great recommendation for the Attorney General's office. She goes to Notre Dame Law, right? Yeah. And then she's, you know, now she went through a couple of clerkships with federal judges, and she's working for the University of Notre Dame as a lawyer. Yeah. But I mean, she wasn't 12 years old and wanting to be a lawyer. Right. Right. She had a skill, but the skill was the
skill was useful. It exposed her, and through that exposure, she found something else that she liked. And, you know, and so that also happens. But one of the things I was told when I was in big corporate by one of my bosses, he said, "Do not develop a career path, because what happens is you're going to miss opportunities because you're focused on I have to get this position and then that position and so forth." Right. He said, you're going to miss stuff. And I listened. And every position I had after my initial position was something that didn't exist until I had it. Right. And so I try to tell my students, you know, don't focus on having a career path, but take advantage of opportunities.
Right. And a destination. And one thing I also said to your students, don't be afraid to go backward to go forward.
Yes, or sideways or whatever, right?
Oh, my Lord. I mean, Nita and I sold everything we had, and we put the two girls and the cockatiel in a minivan, drove up here. But we had a 3,000 square foot house. We went to a 1,200 square foot house. I'm living on 40,000, not like 100,000, and we went backward to go forward.
Yeah. And that happens. You know, you have to, you know, leave one school and go to another school. You have to leave one job, go to another job. You shouldn't feel that you have no opportunities or you can't change.
So your teaching style seems to be the practical application of, I see you nodding your head,
Yes.
the practical application of what you learn in the classroom.
Right. And also to, tell students about, what's it like to be working, things you need to know if you're going to be working. And
Right.
So that you don't have to do, some things you can learn vicariously in the classroom. And then I give my students experiences. So my students right now have to interview 3 people in a company. I'm teaching organizational behavior and apply these organizational behavior concepts.
Right.
And see where the company may need help or what things they can change based on what they're learning, and then give a report.
Well, and they need the practical contact with people who have actually been in business,
Yes.
too.
Yeah. So that gives them that. They're interviewing actual people in business. We bring in a speaker like yourself who's been in business or is in business, and we give them some exposure.
Well, the other thing I see about this, too, is that my perception is that a lot of younger people are looking for 1.5 million TikTok followers, and they don't see I call them the hidden entrepreneurs, the hidden successes, the people that have done things in their lives that they just don't
The people
see.
next door, right?
Right. Exactly.
The millionaire next door.
Yeah.
Per the book.
Well, take a look at like Malik Evans. Malik Evans was an executive for ESNL, right? And now he's the mayor of Rochester. Now, I'll guarantee you, he didn't say when he was 10 years old he wanted to be mayor of Rochester.
Probably not,
right?
no.
But he pivoted.
Yes. The other thing in my classes, when I teach entrepreneurship, my students have to start a business. Not just a simulation, but an actual business.
Oh, really?
Right. And I give them a budget, $10.
Oh, and what has been the most successful one so far?
She made about $1,500 in one semester.
Oh, really? Doing what?
She was selling food.
Okay.
From her country, and she set up a bunch of customers who wanted a nice lunch that she would provide every week. Very creative.
When I was in college, I was station manager of a radio station. I got us an FCC license, which was great experience for a young man that age. But I had to do a project just like that. It was a theoretical business, though. I started a radio station. I think I got a D.
Like Fred Smith, who started FedEx, right? I think he got a C or a D in his. The other student who was successful he had a nonprofit agency. So he did piano recitals and stuff like that, and raised a lot of money for the charity that he wanted to support.
Yeah. Yeah, I know. All my case studies, I had this theory. I always put down it was a problem in communication, and that guaranteed me at least a C+.
There you go.
My formula. Oh my Lord! So we're going to get back into another break in a second here, and we're going to see you at the other end. Well, welcome back. You're listening to the No Nonsense Roundtable. I'm Dom Jennifer, your host, every Saturday right here on News Radio Wham 1180. And we're talking to Dr. D.T. Ogilvie, who is a professor of business at the Rochester Institute of Technology. And let me pass something by you. I was talking to a young man one day. I want you to comment on this. And I said to him, well, what do you want to do with the rest of your life? And he says to me, I want to be an entrepreneur or an accountant.
Okay.
Can you comment on that?
I would say that the young man it sounds like he's been told he should be one or the other, but he hasn't really thought about it, because being an entrepreneur or an accountant are two different things.
Right. And entrepreneur really is not a job description.
No.
At least not to me.
It's a career.
Right.
But it's not a job description, because depending on the nature of the business, what business, where, and so forth, it's going to be different. So there's no one thing that's an entrepreneur.
And the most important thing you teach your students about being a entrepreneur is
not being afraid of failure. Well, I can tell. So I talked about students starting a business. So I can tell who has the ability to be an entrepreneur versus who doesn't, because here's what happens. We have 2 students. We have Dom and DT. So Dom, says, I'm going to have this business, starts trying to do this business, and he fails. And what does he do? He gives up. DT starts a business. It's not working, so she tries something else. It doesn't work at all. She tries something completely different, but she keeps trying
right
until she finds something that works. That's the student who can be an entrepreneur, because being an entrepreneur is not in a panacea for riches. It's a work. It's a career, but it takes work. It takes the ability to fail and learn from failure. And I would even define failure as the succession of creativity, as a succession from a series of failures. Mm-hmm. So you fail, you try something different. You fail, you try something different until you hit on what works.
You see, this is where we were finishing each other's sentences. Now, did you ever see the movie Tucker?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So at the end of it, he's bankrupt. The thing has gone right down the tubes. Mm-hmm. He's in the car and he's looking. He's drawing a picture of a bottle so you can keep like a quart of milk cold in a hot climate. He's like, okay, this didn't work out. I'm gonna. And that's the way you got to be.
Yeah.
You can't get down.
No. If you understand and don't get discouraged by failure, there's no limit to what you can do. If you want to talk about limitlessness, then that's the ability to understand that a failure is just a learning. We think of Edison.
Right.
So, and actually we talk about this in the book. So Edison tried different things and he couldn't find a filament. Well, what he did was he brought in somebody to help him.
Right.
And it wasn't just Edison by himself, but it's like when you're being creative, it's what resources do you need? Mm-hmm.
Go around the mountain, through the mountain, blow the mountain up.
Part of it is usually most creative people need to be part of a team of people because they have different types of creativity. Mm-hmm. So Louis Latimer was the person that Edison needed to help him to bring the filament to fruition. Mm-hmm. And now we have light bulbs. If it weren't for Louis Latimer, who knows what would have happened?
The fact that we try to protect our children from failure seems to be an impediment to their very success, is what you're saying.
It is. If your baby's learning to walk, every time they fall, do you pick them up and don't let them walk again? Mm-hmm. Or you tell them, you're a bad baby, you fell? No. Right. The baby has to fall in order to learn to walk.
Right.
And students, through failure, you learn. So kids learn through failure. And if you don't make a big deal out of it, or you just laugh at, you fell, okay, then that student learns resilience. That kid learns resilience. The kid learns self-confidence. The kid learns that they can learn.
Right.
And those things make a difference.
Right. I enjoyed talking to your class so much yesterday.
Yeah, they enjoyed you.
Well, like I said, I was actually a little nervous talking to them. I'm in a classroom of 35 people who are much smarter than I am. But the life lessons that you learn and the idea that you try to bring in practical knowledge for them that is something that's not academics, it's experiences from people who have actually been in the hunt. I think is very valuable. And that's not, like you said, that's not every university or college that does that.
And I used to, when I was at Rutgers, I created a Doing Business in Another Country course and took students to other countries. And it was extremely valuable for them because they saw something that wasn't in the U.S. They got a better appreciation for what other countries are and better appreciation for other people. Mm-hmm. And that's another thing that students need, because anything that opens up your mind, opens up your ability to think. Right. Gives you a skill and gives you something that's important for your success that other people don't have. Right. And so the more you can do that, and the more we can think about that, of getting our kids exposure to other people, to other countries, that's helpful. Oh, yeah. If we're all the same and think the same and are the same, then progress is not going to be made.
Well, I think that's probably one of the problems in our country all told. I mean, even when we go look at the news, where do we go? We go with the news where we think the news is most like what we want to hear. Right,
exactly. And, they say that you shouldn't have people around you who, birds of a feather flock together. Mm-hmm. But there's a danger. Yeah, it's comfortable. Right. But if you're going to really learn more, you have to be with birds who are different. Right. And when you have this network that's not a strong network, but a weak network, that is the most valuable network you can have, because there are people who are different from you. They have different skills, different knowledge, different abilities. Right. You can learn from them. They can buttress what you need to do if you need to accomplish something. If Edison hadn't met Latimer, who was not in his social circle and, with his friends, then Just think about that. Maybe we'd be sitting here with torches instead of light bulbs.
Right. I have this personal philosophy. Maybe it's a little bit corny. I think creation is still going on.
Yes.
You know, my personal philosophy, theology, whatever you want to call it, is that I think that you have to participate the best you can to make the place a little bit better than it had been before.
Right.
And it seems like you subscribe to that too.
Yeah. Everything around us is invented by somebody or created by somebody.
Sure.
And there are more things that we'll see. People will be creating. But what we don't want is, I was talking to a student the other day, or I think he was in a master's program, and he had ideas like 10 years ago great idea, he did nothing with it. And that's not unusual. There are people who are idea people. They're different. That's why we talk in our book, creativities, not creativity. Yeah. Because there are different types of creativity. People have creativity that operates on different levels of the value chain. So if I'm an idea person, that's great. But then I need you, because you're a person who can take an idea and do something with it and be creative in the process of bringing it to fruition. So
I love talking to people like you, because at the end of the day, somebody's a little better off for what you're doing, other than, there's some people that go to work and you do a job to get the money, which is perfectly okay. But at the end of the day, you have affected a student, a young person, and you never know how that's going to affect them years from now. Yeah. And you have to have some students that probably contact you years after you've taught them.
I have a student just LinkedIn texted me yesterday, and he was in my first class in '94 when I taught at Rutgers. Okay, and we're still in touch. In fact, he invited me to his wedding. Another student is the CEO of Siemens. Wow, in Greece, and he sent me a memo about something I taught in my class that he thought was very powerful and helped him in his career. Yeah. I say this all the time. It's too bad we're on the radio, because I look at the smile on your face and the joy that's giving you. And it's genuine. And unfortunately, we're out of time. And this was wonderful. We're going to have to do this again. I would love to. I would love to do this again. You know what? Why don't we think about doing this with 1 or 2 youth students? That would be nice. That would be nice. Yeah. I will see if they're interested. I think one or two might be. I think I know which ones would be. Okay, well, DT, I really do appreciate you coming in. You've been a good friend, and I'm glad to know you. I'm glad we were able to get together at that lunch at one time. Yes, we're going to have to thank our friend. Fate. Yes, fate. Well, everybody, we'll see you next week on the No Nonsense Roundtable. Well, thanks for watching this YouTube. If you liked it, please like and share.